Hello and welcome to this IOSH Magazine filmed roundtable. You have to imagine the table is round, on ISO 45001, the new international OSH management standard. I'm very pleased to be joined today by 4 experts. We have Mike Dennison, Health, Safety and Sustainability Consultant from the EEF Manufacturers Organisation, David Parr, Head of Audit and Technical Services at British Safety Council, Sally Swinchwood, Lead Programme Manager at British Standards Institute, and Terry Fisher, Principal Lead Assessor at NQA. So, 45001, a difficult gestation, I think we could say, first proposed in 2013. Here we are 5 years later, but the standard was finally launched on the 12th of March. It has common features with the other ISO standards, 9001 for quality, 14001 for environment. It will replace BS OSAS 18001, but there'll be a 3-year lead-in time. I think most people are familiar with those basic facts. Today we'd like to explore a little more about what the gap for companies who might already be certified to other standards will be reaching the state where they're ready for 45001. So my first question really to all of you is, what will be the biggest changes for 18001 registrants that they will have to make? Can I start with you, Mike?
You can. I'm guessing it depends on where the company is at the moment. If the company is switched on and is very proactive about health and safety and has got 18,000 for the right reasons to use it to drive performance, then I think it's not going to make a huge difference for them. They've already got leadership on board, they've got that buy-in. I think that will not make a huge problem for them. I think the companies who've got it because it's a contractual requirement or similar may have some more challenges, particularly getting away from the management representative and bringing leadership on board and involving their workers more. So I can see some challenges for those kind of organisations.
We'll come back to both of those points. Thanks very much. Terry?
Yeah, I think context is the other issue that a lot of clients will initially struggle with, because they don't, it's written not in common day language, it's written in audit language. So the first thing that clients ask is, well, what do they mean by context? And I think we need to break that down into understanding bite-sized chunks. And once you get down to understand why an organisation is, what an organisation does, and why it does that, and then you'll find most organisations have the fundamental principles of the context of the organisation there. It can be very difficult to get down to that level though, because you have to sort of unwrap it really.
And we will try and unwrap context a little later as well. Thank you. Sally?
Well, building on what you're saying, Terry, I think the fact is that people don't know what they know. So people with 18001, they already know this. It's just shifting the mindset slightly. You can already do this. You're already demonstrating it, actually. So probably the other thing, other than actually providing the evidence that you know your context, is ensuring that it's a cultural thing. It's not an expert thing, it's not a one department thing, it's everybody is involved in health and safety management.
Which is something that I think a lot of health and safety managers struggle with, in that they're very good at managing compliance from their own discrete area, but actually getting buy-in from the whole of the organisation is often a difficult thing, isn't it? Do you think the standard, the requirement to do that, to drive the standard will actually, to gain certification, will actually help them get senior management support to get the buy-in of the rest of the departments?
I think it will. I think the requirements about worker participation and consultation, a big part of that is making sure the workers closest to the risks are part of the decision making, that they're part of the conversation, so that it's a whole organisation conversation rather than just a certain level of the organisation. And I think the requirements will help build that culture.
Again, good, you're queuing us up for some later discussion about worker involvement. David, do you think there's anything more to say on where people will find the biggest gaps if they're already certified?
I sort of agree concur with everything that everyone's just said, but I do feel that although I agree with Terry about the sort of organisations who've got mature safety management systems won't find this as challenging as perhaps organisations that are coming in for the standard to adopt it, straight off. I do feel that we shouldn't underplay that there are significant changes in the leadership area. So yeah, you might have leadership commitment for your 18001 safety management system, but 45 is much more strategic, I feel. So it's all about integrating health and safety management systems and the culture into the whole organisation. Whereas I don't think 18001 actually demands that at the moment. It demands a commitment, but to actually integrate it into the culture and the system is a big step forward, I feel. I think that's probably the biggest change, personally.
If you were starting from, if you've got, let's say, 18001, and you're now thinking, right, sometime in the next year and a half, I'd like to gain certification to 45001. What are the first things that you should be doing? What are the things you'd need to be starting straight away to get ready for that process, Sally?
Well, it's a basic gap analysis initially, but if you have got 18001 and you embrace the intent of 18001, you're well on your way. So it's then just mapping it out. Where are the gaps? Where could we not actually show that we're doing something? But if you've got a good health and safety management system, your gaps aren't going to be that large. You're going to be able to distinguish fairly easily where you need to start.
Okay. Terry?
I would agree with that. I think the gap process and the analysis of where you are and where you want to be is a critical element, because you know your organisation best. It's not an external agency that can come in and know your organisation. And it's really critical that you get that understanding. And it's about integrating the requirements of the standard into the normal everyday business practice of the organisation. Going back to the cultural thing, I think that's the critical understanding that you need to review and grasp at the onset, rather than, you may be doing it for various reasons, including commercial, but it's getting the benefit of the management system overall, and the requirements of it.
Sure. Mike?
Coming back to the point on worker participation, you've got your initial gap analysis that looks at the standard and the compliance with it in your system, but then if we're going to talk about worker participation being right through from policy writing right down, we need to get the workforce on board as early as possible and start to engage them and build confidence in why we're doing this. Why is the company doing it? Is it for commercial reasons? Is it for the benefit of the business as a whole and the workforce? You have to be clear and honest with the workforce what you're doing and why you're doing it and what you need from them. So raising their awareness and trying to engage them, build their commitment.
This is an interesting point. If you set up a whole new form of worker consultation quite late on, how do you think auditors are going to be interested? And this would be true also of leadership commitment and so on, in finding out how recently things were set up.
I think so. Most companies have got a traditional safety committee now, maybe looking at accidents and things that have happened. How involved are they in policy procedures, proactive things? I think auditors will see through if it's last minute, drop it in and produce a few minutes for the auditor. I'm sure they will.
So actually, if you're setting up one of the things you'd want to do early on would be to set up the kind of arrangements that you think are required in the standard and have them running quite smoothly, so that people said, if they were interviewed by an auditor, worker representatives or whatever would say, we only started doing this last week. Is kind of you'd want to start now. Is there, David? Is there anything else that you think that people...
I think the standard itself, that's a really good point you've just made. The standard itself is based around Plan, Do, Check, Act, which basically is a combination of systems and behaviours. So you can have the systems in place, and most health and safety well, all health and safety professionals hopefully would be able to write and develop a system for an organisation that met the standard requirements. However, it's demonstrating, as Mike was saying, the behaviours and the actual implementation of the system that's perhaps going to be a bit more challenging. So if processes are relatively new, you know, especially in terms of participation, there's a subtle difference between consulting and participating. You know, so participating is involvement in the decision-making process. So can you demonstrate that? You know, and it's not just about, as we've been talking about, it's not just about achieving the accreditation, although obviously that is, you know, a nice to have and in some cases a requirement. It's about adopting the ethos of the standard as well, really. And as far as I'm concerned, that's about integrating health and safety into the business, which is what I particularly like about 45. It is all about integrating it into the business processes, isn't it, and practices, really. So health and safety, I know it's a bit glib, but it's part of everything everyone does. I know that's a bit glib, but it actually is required by the standard, isn't it, really?
Picking off some of those features of the standard that you mentioned initially as things that people are going to have to concentrate on. If we have a look at explore senior management and commitment to leadership and commitment to senior management a little more, Terry, what do you think are the implications, obviously for safety practitioners, of the requirement in the standard for leadership to be shown generally at the top?
I think one of the biggest issues traditionally has been there's been an appointment of a management safety manager, management rep, call them what you will, within the organisation, and it's been to some extent sidelined, and it's been, you get on doing the safety management and we'll get on and run the business. And those two things need to be integrated and brought together.
Yeah,
as
absolutely.
an integral part of what you're trying to achieve for 45,001. Far too long as we'll run the business and we'll do some health and safety stuff.
Almost like a bolt-on function.
It's a bolt-on.
Yeah.
And we really need to get away from that because, as we say, it is fundamental to every organisation, regardless what they do or how they operate, whatever the culture is. And they need to integrate that so they can develop and move forward and get better. Because it's not about being absolutely bulletproof from day one, else there wouldn't be such a thing as continual improvement.
Sure.
It's bringing that into the day-to-day.
Okay, thank you. Mike?
I think that a lot of companies have done it already. Organisations who've got 9001 for quality have tried to integrate it into what they do, customer satisfaction, product quality. They've tried to build that into everybody's job, everybody's responsible. They can do the same for safety. Make sure everybody understands their responsibilities and what's expected of them. And then participation, consultation comes in again, involving the workforce more and more.
David, in practice, what does the kind of more general requirement for leadership mean that an auditor can do coming into an organisation or is likely to do coming into an organisation?
Well, I think obviously a lot of the verification and the assessment of the levels of leadership within an organisation. Go back to the plan, do, check, act. You can have processes and you can have systems in place where the top management are leading on those. And one of the explicit requirements of 45 talks about top management developing, leading and promoting a safety culture throughout the business. It's an explicit requirement. So that would be a little bit more difficult, I think, for an auditor to assess. I think you can only do that through interview with your, so access to top management may be something that, although I find this a little bit hard to sort of consider as a new requirement for auditors, access to top managers should be absolutely fundamental for the auditor. So you will need to be, I know it sounds obvious, but you'd be surprised that, 18,001 organisations that perhaps the top management aren't always available for interview and things like that. But there'll be no getting away from that with 45, because you will have to interview and talk to the top management and see what the sort of genuine commitment is and how they can demonstrate that. I think it goes a bit deeper than signing the policy, and well, I'm sure it goes a bit deeper than signing the policy and attending safety committee meetings. It's much more demonstrable that the top management are going to have to be able to prove to the auditor, so the auditor can verify and follow through that they are actually genuinely committed. So things like providing adequate resources, supporting managers at different levels, how do they get involved with that? Have they got personal KPIs? In relation to health and safety. All of this is really demonstrable evidence for an auditor that you are trying to develop, promote and lead. That's how I interpret that sort of sub-clause, if you like.
Sally, people are saying top management. That suggests we could be talking about multiple interviews by an auditor.
Could be.
So what kind of thing do you think would, if you're a safety manager or head of safety, and you're thinking, right, I've got to prepare these people to be able to talk knowledgeably, who may not have had to before.
Well, there's your first problem, isn't it? You shouldn't have to prepare them. You should be working already so that top management know what's going on. They are committed to it. And not just safety, health. We keep talking about safety, and that's the traditional focus. And I think top management can help prove their commitment by promoting a culture in the way they talk that looks after the people who work for them in the widest sense. Not just in the slips and trips area, but in terms of how's your workforce doing? Is it, are you having people turn up for work when they're sick because they're scared of losing their jobs? Do you have stressed workers? How are you dealing with the bigger picture? You shouldn't have to prepare your top management. They're accountable. They have always been accountable, but they're explicitly accountable now.
But if they're accountable, and yes, they may sit through board meetings where they receive briefings. They may start every board meeting with a discussion of safety or whatever. Some of them may even do, take part in safety tours. Is that going to be the kind of thing that will satisfy an auditor? If you're an FD and you're sitting in front of, I'm just trying to think of what it's like to be the safety manager, thinking, right, if we're going to go for certification at some point in the future, what do I, how do I bring our senior management up to speed? Terry, what do you think?
I think from an assessment point of view, you may well verify that from the ground up rather than from the top down. So it may well be that these discussions, interviews, call them what you will, with senior management, are taken after you've been and sampled the various processes and activities within, so you actually get a feel for the culture and the resources and the environment in which they work, not this theoretical, ideological, oh, we're really committed, we're really good, we're really, etc., etc. It can be at the later stage of an assessment, reinforcing what you've actually seen on the ground. Well, I saw an issue with X, or I had a chat with the various people, and it's then, so are you aware of these issues? Can you demonstrate you're aware? It's that type of thing, because that's showing that it's actually, in practice, it's actually working.
I think leadership, you don't have to be a top manager to demonstrate leadership. No. I mean, leadership runs right through all the organisation, but to take Sally's point, quite rightly, in my personal opinion, there are explicit requirements on top management. So naturally, there's going to be a big focus on that. And I do agree with you, shop floor to top floor culture is perfect. But we can't get away from the fact that it has to come from the top. It has to be driven from the top. Because, like it or lump it, top management basically dictate an organisation's culture, don't they? And yes, everybody should be involved, and I completely agree the auditor will, and probably will get a different take on things, depending on who they're interviewing.
Yeah.
But I think that's a significant change with 45 to 18, is these explicit requirements on top management.
And I think it's going to force top management out of the ivory tower, out of the boardroom. They're going to have to actually know how the work is really being done as opposed to how people say it should be done. It's going to force top managers, I think, to actually walk the shop floor a little bit more and get to know their operations at a practical level, more than perhaps they've had to before, so that it isn't just about being briefed, it's about seeing, observing with your own eyes. And
being seen to be interested as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But all the things we've just said, I mean, to me, like, if you were, not that I ever would be, but if you're a top manager, why would you not want to do that? I mean, why would you not embrace that? You know, to me, it's like...
If we were being charitable, we'd say it's because they have so many other competing pressures, and because there is no general director's duty to manage safety in the country. I mean, you know, I once ran a petition on that went to the HSE board, but I realise other people have different views. But I think it's interesting, Mike, that because you've been focusing on worker involvement right from the start, that what Terry's saying is that actually when auditors are going round taking the temperature of worker involvement, they could also be asking about visible leadership by the board, and that's an interesting thing to bear in mind, that actually people walking the talk is going to be something to be monitored other than just by asking the people involved what they've been doing.
The original part of the question talked about safety is number one on their agenda, and they talk about it. I hear that an awful lot from senior management teams. It's like, so what? What have you actually talked about? What did you do off the back of it? Not just it was number one, it was important for other reasons rather than seeing to be. It should be number one.
I completely agree.
It actually is, and it means something to us.
You hear, it's a common, when you're auditing it, it's a common response from top or senior management. Safety is our number one priority. And then they get a little bit stumped when you say why.
Yeah. So how can you, so what
it sort of goes quiet then, like, you know, why is it more important than anything else in the business? Because really it should just be part and parcel of everything that we do.
Part of good management.
And that's what we're moving towards, isn't it? We've had these silos in the past for health and safety, for quality, for environment, and they're all very, very important. They're not talking to each other, and I think that's where we are moving to. It's always been true that if you want a successful organisation, you need to look after all of its parts all of the time in a way that works. It's a holistic vision. And I think 45001 does help move health and safety into that holistic vision, that if you want your organisation to be successful, you've got to be considering the whole all of the time. You can't do it by going, safety's our number one concern, with the finance director going, no, money's our number one concern. It won't work. It's got to be integrated. They've got to talk to each other.
And that presumably means safety managers making more of a case to finance directors for the financial benefits of good health and safety as well, so that they can talk more about that at audit or at any time, really, or just that they understand that.
But if you're looking after your workers' health and well-being as well as their safety, you're going to have fewer lost days in terms of production. Financially, that works.
Better staff retention, less turnover, all of the benefits of having a happy, healthy workforce who do a good day's work whilst they're at work.
They want to come to work, they feel valued,
Work's meaningful for them.
I think that, you know, organisations need to remember that the people within the organisation are probably A, their biggest asset, and B, financially their biggest contribution to that organisation. And you need to get A, very good value from that, but you need to look after it.
It's your biggest risk, isn't it?
It's
if
a
you
common
manage it
business
badly.
approach, you know, and people need to look at that. And the standard needs to be seen as much as a business management tool as it is an occupational health and safety management tool. Hence why it can be the same principles and XSL, ISO standards can be applied.
No, I completely agree.
Do you think there's anything else on, before we move on, do you think there's anything else on the leadership requirements that is important to not to warn people about, but to give them to give them a sense of what work they've got ahead of them.
I would say the leadership has got it touches on every other element of the management system.
It does. That's right. Yeah.
And we shouldn't look at the management system in a clause by clause approach. It's not leadership, tick the box, move on, we've done that. Let's go on to whatever, operational control or whatever. It's a management system, and all these component parts interrelate to each other, so they don't work in isolation.
Well,
and so there's a lot of influence.
Leadership and worker participation run right the way through the whole standard, really, don't they? So you're absolutely right. There's an explicit clause on leadership, but it runs right the way through the whole thing.
Yeah, which brings us onto, I think, neatly onto worker participation, which was something where I think the drafting process added some real weight, and so it's very hard to miss now in the final standard the requirement to involve and consult the workforce. Mike, what do you think? Again, we're looking at what people have to do to prepare, and what the components of good involvement might look like.
I think I said before, it needs to be more than just your quarterly safety committee. That's just a formal sort of sign that it's happening, and it's a formal meeting. This needs to be every day, all day, part of my job. KPIs were mentioned earlier for managers. I've worked in an organisation in the past who every single worker had a KPI that was safety. So to bring it down to, it's your job as well. It's part of your day-to-day activity. It's not something new, it's not a bolt-on. You're engaged at that point, whether you're involved in risk assessments or audits or inspections or whatever, you're actually have some responsibility for safety. So I think there's awareness, there's training for the workforce needed, and then I think there's that engagement with them, talking to them, listening to them, right from the top downwards.
Terry, how much do you think auditors will be looking at employee input rather than just requirements on them? Under Section 7 or whatever, kind of, but parlayed into KPIs.
I think the primary thing will be the discussion points, and can that be demonstrated has there been participation in hazard reporting, risk assessments, all the functional, operational stuff, which, it's a management system, the health and safety officer or manager or whatever comes in and does that to us. We don't actually get involved in that, and that's the fundamental key to this, because the people that operate the processes know on the day-to-day practice how it works. They know what the risks are, and if they can't identify the risks, they need to be made aware. People do things, and they make bad judgment calls, but for all the positive right reasons. They don't deliberately injure themselves, they don't deliberately do something wrong. They do it because they think it's better. I need to stop that from happening. It's better for the business if I stop that from happening. They don't think about the consequences, and that's where we need to get down to with regard to the actual function and operation of a management system, as well as, and that can only be driven from the top by an actual effort and an engagement to get that participation involved.
Otherwise there's a clash there between, say, production
Yes.
and safety.
That's
they
right.
should be running together
They should
smoothly.
be running together.
And I think what we're not talking about here is the definition of worker. And I think that's really fundamental. People have really got to get their head around the fact that worker means everybody, including top management, down to a volunteer who comes in on a Saturday. Everybody is a worker. So that participation, that consultation, that involvement in decision making, in making sure the responses to the risks that are identified are the right responses, that they're practical, that they work. It's everybody's duty, and everybody needs to know that they are part of that conversation and their input is valid. It's not down to us and them. We absolutely don't want management doing things to workers, even though workers is everybody. It's not a tiered system. No. It's got to be a collaboration.
This is an interesting thing. Do you think that how would auditors find out whether people on night shifts were, because this is the famous thing, isn't it, is that people get left out on nights, whether or not they were consulted in the same way that the day shifts were?
I think I just go back to the point earlier that, you know, there is a subtle difference between consulting and participating. You know, participating is you know, actively being able to demonstrate that that all the workers and the groups that Sally just mentioned are involved in the decision-making process and participate in the continual improvement. Our auditors, we always, I won't say instruct, that's not the right word, but we encourage them to ask at all different levels, do you feel empowered to intervene? And it's quite a powerful conversation that you can have just with that very simple question. Do you feel empowered to intervene? And, you know, if there's a health and safety issue, do you feel as though the culture's right? Is your management system set up in such a way that you can say, whoa, we stopped this, we're not doing this, you know, let's look at a better way of doing it. And that to me is active participation. It also demonstrates your culture, you know, your leadership as well. If the culture is such that people can do that, then you know, there's good leadership, there's strong leadership. You know, it's all linked in my view anyway.
Yes.
And you know, we're not in the 19th century anymore. It isn't us and them, workers and managers and unions fighting it. This is working together for the good of us all. And I think 45001 is an enabling, empowering tool in that sense. It's saying that's how you have to work. You've got to prove you're working like that. You can't be stuck in the past where you just tell people what to do. You've got to talk to them and listen to them and, you know, have their input on deciding what you're going to do.
I think that's the key, isn't it? I mean, you've got most organisations, certainly within the UK, will have strong forums set up for consultation with, you know, with worker groups and other interested parties, other stakeholders. But does that forum, does it actually then contribute to the ultimate decision, you know, relating to a particular health and safety issue, or is it a, you know, is it just a sounding board? Is it just a forum that meets every quarter and, you know, discusses, I don't know, the light bulbs are out in the men's toilet and things like that? Because often that's what happens.
Yeah.
Not the light bulbs in the men's toilet. I'm just
But it can be issues like that they're repeatedly brought up in the documentation.
I mean,
you know, some
exactly,
people have attended the meeting and they've been, you know, attended in the minutes. So there's documentation there to demonstrate that.
And what happened after that? Was the decision taken already before that it was actually, you know?
Yeah.
That often happens.
Yeah.
You know, it's often. Sorry.
It's not going to just be shift workers either. It's companies with mobile workers, home workers.
Yeah,
how do we show that those
absolutely,
people are
yeah.
involved and engaged?
Yeah.
That's going to be awkward for the auditor to check, and awkward for the company to prove that they've been doing it.
But presumably the auditors, because it's seeded so thoroughly through the standard, it's going to be one of the areas that the auditors will be spending, compared with say 18001, will be spending a really good proportion of their time looking at, because it keeps coming back in the clauses.
You'd be disappointed if they didn't, to be honest, because it is a huge emphasis running right the way through the standard. You know, the two main themes really, aren't they? Leadership and worker participation.
I think that's one of the real challenges for organisations, particularly as you say, organisations isn't these days all about people trundling up to one site and being there from 9 till 5 and going home again. There's so many different types of workers. A health and safety meeting once a quarter isn't going to cut it. No. You know, I'll miss it because I'm out of the office a lot. So, you know, how do I get involved in that if I'm somebody who's mobile, somebody who travels, somebody who works from home or is part-time? You're going to have different ways of communicating and participating, raising issues and finding out what is done once the issue is raised.
So part of the gap analysis would be looking at who is not covered, kind of, or is not central to your current arrangements, wouldn't be seen as being.
Which sort of links back to clause 4, doesn't it, which talks about needs and expectations of different groups within the organisation. Well, not just within, but external to it as well. So it's quite clever, isn't it? Lean.
It all works together.
It all works together, yeah.
Anybody would think it was a management system?
Yeah. Anyone would think you spent 5 years doing it anyway, yeah.
And this kind of brings us onto the thorny area of outsourcing, contractors, supply chain. They're part of your risk.
Absolutely.
They are affected. They can bring in hazards. They can be affected by what's going on. You need to talk to them. It can't be just brushed aside.
Yeah.
This is all part of the same conversation.
How far down a supply chain do you think that you have to go?
It's a good question, that one. As far as the company thinks is important to them, I guess. How much impact is that supplier going to have on them if something goes wrong? If, for example, some of our member companies are automotive, they work just in time for their deliveries, their company, their first chain supplier deals in the same way, it goes down the chain. If there's an accident right down at the bottom end that delays everything, it's going to have a big business impact on them. So it depends on the business. It depends what you're making, what you're doing, what your context is.
It's the context, isn't it? And it's the external factors as well as the internal, isn't it? You know, so local authorities, I know it's an obvious thing to say, but are directly affected by political change, for example. You know, resourcing, funding, whatever your political stance is, it changes from government to government, from local authority to local authority. And that is bound to have an impact on the effectiveness of the safety management system. It must do. You know, the actual resources available to make the objectives of the standard actually work, you know. So risk profiling, both at an organisational level and operational, for me is key to clause 4.
And
So
then
you're
how
looking
far
at
they
what
go and audit it is also important. Do we then audit our supply chain? How far do we push the requirements
how do you check
down?
them? Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's how far you can exert some control, isn't it? But knowing that, as in that example, if there are political changes, I can't control that.
Yeah.
But I have got to mitigate
You've
the
got
risk.
to manage it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But if you go beyond straightforward control of contractors, which obviously, you know, section 3.1 in the UK of the Health and Safety at Work Act means that there is a real liability for people. Beyond that, I'd say that supply chain influence and interest in health and safety has always lagged environment by a long way. Do you think that the standard is likely to promote people, that people are going to have to just do more of that, being their brother's keeper a little bit more than they've been in the past?
They will have to evidence that for an auditor coming in, looking at their system, the clauses there around outsourcing.
Terry?
You can't just...
And it's directly linked to the procurement process, isn't it? It's not just the, oh well, we thought that was a very risky process, so we outsourced it to Fred Bloggs just down the road or whatever. It's how you actively manage that to eliminate or reduce and control the risks to the level of your influence and risk to your business, because it isn't always a direct impact on your operation. It's the, do you want to be associated with
reputationally
the reputation, which is also a commercial consideration in this, you know, in the modern world. So it's a very dynamic activity really, and it needs to be seen in the whole, not in just I think very short, narrow, straight tunnel vision.
I think clause 8 in the new standard, which, you know, part of it talks about procurement, outsourcing, management of contractors, management and appointment of contractors.
Yes.
I think is a massive step forward from 18,001, because in my experience auditing within the UK and internationally, it never ceases, fails to amaze me, never ceases to amaze me how an organisation can be really mature and have a really good safety management system, and yet will allow contractors on the premises who, you know, let's be honest, perhaps are a million miles away from, you know, the standards of that organisation. And it does happen. It happens to lots and lots of instances, excuse me, that I've experienced. You know, it's you start looking at maybe some of the bigger projects and the bigger contractors are it's pretty a tight process, but some of your, you know, smaller contractors, if they've got satellite sites and things like that, you know, the local electrician, or I'm not picking on electricians, but you know, who's been coming to the site for time immemorial, you know, it's It's always, it amazes me actually how sort of loose it can be, the management of contractors.
Sally, on just purely technical thing, do you think auditors will actually be going to talk to suppliers, or will they be looking at just from the point of view of what the organisation has in documentation about its supply chain arrangements?
It's going to depend on context. Again, I think there are times when you absolutely have to talk to your suppliers or your contractors or whoever, because how big an influence are they having on your health and safety performance, and how big an influence are you having on theirs? I mean, it cuts both ways. If they were coming onto your site to do work, you have a duty of care. You know. I'm
thinking about the auditors, though. I mean,
no, so they will have to. It will be context. It will be context. In some organisations, a paper review might be enough. And in others, it absolutely won't. So it will be the level of influence, I think.
I see what you mean.
Also, on the day of an assessment, there could well be external contractor activity taking place on site. You can go and chat to the contractor. How's it going? Etc. etc. There's the direct communication.
We're back to shop floor, aren't we? It's the people who are actually doing the work.
Back to the
What's
work.
your experience?
Yes, it's the worker thing that is critical.
So one of the criticisms, and this may be true in a small proportion of cases of management systems audits in health and safety in the past, has been that sometimes people will come in and go and sit in an office and just go through the documents. It sounds like that's not that if that's ever happened, then
surely not.
No. Then it's going to be very, very difficult for auditors to just get a paper view of the organisation in 45,001.
Yeah, absolutely. I said before, it's my interpretation of it is it's plan, do, check, act, which is systems and behaviours. There is a place for, obviously, for verifying the systems and the documentation, but it's more about how that's being implemented, or if it's being implemented, and how effectively. So you can't do that looking at a process. You've got to get out and talk to people. You've got to go and observe. You've got to, actually watch the operations taking place, and that includes stakeholders that we've talked about, contractors, suppliers. I can't see how you can audit this standard to an effective level without engaging with those groups. I really don't. I take Sally's point about the, horses for courses sort of thing. It's going to be more prevalent in, let's say, I don't know, a process safety environment than perhaps, a telesales environment, just as an example. But nevertheless, you're still going to have to do that. And why wouldn't you want to be honest? I would expect the auditors to do that. It's not all about the auditing though, is it? It's about, embracing this standard and what it stands for, really. It's not just about getting the badge, is it, the accreditation?
No.
And I think, the organisation has a right to demand a proper audit.
Yeah.
If you've got an auditor who wants to sit in an office and do a paper review, sack your auditor. Get somebody who's actually doing the job properly, because you want the benefit of this, which is to save lives, which is to protect people. You're not getting that from paper review.
And to be fair, most organisations, in my experience, now would expect that. They wouldn't expect the auditor just to, be looking through the documented system or the,
and they regularly say, I don't want that auditor back. From experience, they say
not at our place, they don't.
Coming back.
No,
so right. They will say to the organisation auditing them, I don't want to see him or her again. I want somebody more thorough, somebody better. So they do that already.
Yeah, I agree.
They want value for money, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And really, you want somebody to check how you're doing and point out where you can be better. It's not just about I failed. It's about, oh wow, there's an opportunity there. We missed something, and we need to put something in place to fix it. You're not getting that unless you have a good auditor.
And the standard now has got risks and opportunities in it, which is something professionals are going to have to get their head around. It's not safety risk, it's risk and opportunity to the management system success.
Yeah.
So That's going to change things as well.
A lot of organisations are sort of demonstrating opportunities for improvement almost by default, aren't they, really, through, you know, things like your risk assessment process. You're identifying additional controls and further controls, which by themselves are opportunities to improve. But now the standard is drawing that out, really, isn't it? It's saying, well, yeah, come on, let's focus on these opportunities, you know, both your external assessor and the internal managers. Let's focus on this because we are actually doing it, you know.
Well, opportunities is an interesting one, because obviously it's something which is core language to the new ISO management system standards, but it's the one that some people have said fits least well with health and safety. Are you not shoehorning opportunities into sort of health and safety into something where you can pick up opportunities?
Possibly, but just my view. I think, in my experience, a lot of organisations are already demonstrating this almost, as I say, almost by default. You know, through a good risk management process and management review and, you know, performance review processes are identifying these opportunities to improve. I think, me personally, I just think it's terminology. I think, as I say, organisations, a lot of organisations are already demonstrating this, I think, anyway. Like I say, by default, it's just getting the heads around that these are actually opportunities to improve, you know.
If we tie it back to the healthy, happy worker again, somebody who is turning up more often and is more productive, that's an opportunity to have a better business by being safer, by looking after the health of the workforce. So there's a business benefit. So we can start to sell it better to management if that's needed.
Yeah,
sure.
And the opportunity could be driven from a commercial consideration. They want to introduce a different process, a new activity. Because of a commercially driven, we've got an opportunity here to deliver a new service or product to the market. So they need to integrate the safe worker and all the things that come with a safety management system into that process. And not do it as we've done that and now we need to look at the safety elements of. That's where the opportunities can come from. Continual improvement shouldn't need to be considered. It should be a natural output of the management standard. It shouldn't be, we've got to consider continual improvement. It should be, actually, we've achieved it because.
That's what I say, a lot of organisations are doing it by default almost, aren't they? You know, it's just getting used to the concept, or, you know, the terminology of opportunity and continual improvement.
But if you're using your management system in the way a management system should be used, in that all parts are moving all the time and context changes continually, therefore risks change continually, therefore opportunities arise continually, it's always going on. It isn't, you're right, it's terminology. It's not new. People have always taken opportunities. They've always identified and prioritised and decided whether they're going to take the opportunity or not. And I think here we have a real opportunity to expand what OHS means in the company. You know, there is more emphasis on health. There is more emphasis on the happy, healthy worker, because actually that's fundamental to everything else. Happy, healthy workers have less accidents. It improves safety. And financially, if you're looking after the health from day one of workers, you're not going to end up in court 20 years down the line. You know, financially it's going to save you money too. People won't be off sick if they're healthy.
It should be seen as an investment, not a cost.
Absolutely.
That's the critical message. You know, it isn't a cost to the business.
I think that's the difficulty, isn't it? Is that a lot of safety and health practitioners working in organisations are fighting that sense in senior management that it is a cost. That's, you know, and that they do it as a kind of a form of with increasing fines in the UK, particularly as a form of insurance against cost, but it's but they don't see it as part of something that generates a better business.
So it's about bringing it back into these are business management systems, not occupy. And I think that is something that potentially ISO have missed a trick. They should be selling this as modules of a business management system, not as, we've got air management and they're all done in isolation. they all collectively cover different aspects or focus on different elements of the overall well-being of a business or an organisation.
And this is the next challenge.
And this is the next challenge.
With standards is how can we make it easier for the user to see that that is what it is and that's what is intended, rather than it being people with different hats on, working independently.
Because as soon as you go into an organisation and you say, I'm here to look at your quality management, so instantly the barriers come up and there's a view that, okay, that's the parameters now of this. When actually, there's potentially no parameters of it.
We should be auditing how you're running your business.
Yes.
And taking all those parts
It's the effectiveness of that overall.
Well, I think that's where the standards a real significant step forward from 18, because it's very contemporary, isn't it? The subjects we've been talking about in this session are quite contemporary, aren't they? Really, you know, with no disrespect to 18,000, you know, it's fantastic at the time and everything. But would we really be having these conversations about leadership at top management level and worker participation and, you know, health and well-being and things like that? I doubt it if we were talking about 18. And I'll say I'm not decrying 18. It's been a fantastic model and all that, but it's, you know, it was last reviewed 9 years ago, and to me this new standard is very contemporary, and it gives you the opportunity to integrate, and it's no, you know, it's not by fluke that all the clauses are married up with quality and management. There's a reason for that, isn't there? Sorry, quality and environment. You know, there is a reason for that. You know, for me, it's a significant step forward, but it's one that, you know, taking up Louis' point, health and safety practitioners or professionals or, you know, management have always had to fight your corner a little bit, you know, in terms of the benefits to the business. It's always been perceived, but I think that's changed. The more mature organisations really do embrace it now and see that, you know, the cost, the potential costs to the business, but more to the point, the benefits it can actually bring, you know, by all the things that Sally mentioned about healthy, happy workforce, you know, and it's a bit twee, isn't it? And it's a bit glib, but it's actually true, isn't it?
Morale, culture, all these things.
You know, it's not rocket science, but it's true, isn't it? If you've got, you know, a workforce that likes coming into work, enjoys and feels as though they're contributing, participating, surely they're going to be more efficient. Surely they're going to stay more likely to stay with you. You know, be more loyal. You know, promote the business itself. It's a no-brainer to me. Like, but maybe I'm being a bit simplistic.
I think we do need to keep it on a relatively simplistic level, because that's when you're going into businesses, that's what people want to know. They don't want to know the fancy phrase. So what do I need to do, or this is how we can deliver it.
I know we're going off piste a little bit, but I do think you mentioned the sentencing guidelines. I do think if all else fails, that they're having a big impact. I think they're having a massive impact now. People are at boardroom level are actually taking note now. So some of these fines are, you know, and not before time, in my view, are you know, really making people sit up a little bit and think, how many million?
Yeah. Particularly sentencing on potential for harm rather than harm itself.
Exactly.
I think it's made an enormous difference. Yeah. But coming back, you were saying that people don't want the jargon necessarily, the kind of the phraseology of the standard. But one thing that has confused people, I think, or people sometimes find most difficult, is the word context. Can we unpick context of the organisation a little?
I thought we had.
Well, we've touched it, but it'd be useful for you to sort of join up the elements of what we've spoken about so far that you think talk to context as a Mike.
So the kind of company I mentioned earlier who are thinking about going beyond zero, it's setting what we want to achieve out of this. Why are we doing these things? So where do we fit in? Where do we fit in with our supply chain, our customers? You come back to the phrase in the standard about interested parties. So where does the business sit? What's its goals? What's its objectives, etc.? I think that needs to be very clear from day one.
And that, I think, sounds very simple, but most organisations, until you ask the question, why do you do that? Who do you do that for? How do you measure that? How do you know that that's working? Until you ask those questions, people don't look at context of organisation and go, oh, I need to do that. So you need to sort of reverse logic it really, and take it in reverse and say, well, why do you do that? What's the benefit? What you're trying to achieve? And once people understand, oh, well, I do, and then off they go. You've opened the floodgates. It's
because it's not hard.
It's not hard.
It's not. It's not as simple as it might seem on the surface, but it's not hard, and it's not something people should be afraid of. It's self-awareness, isn't it, as you say? And as individuals, until we really look at ourselves and ask ourselves questions, we might not understand our motivations or how we're affecting other people. It's just the same in a business. But you do know, if you actually think about it, you do know the answers. You do know who your relevant interested parties are. You do know what you're dealing with. You know how big your organisation is. You know what activities you're doing. It's just actually thinking how they all interlink, how the jigsaw works. But it's not something people should be concerned about, really.
It's the senior management team sitting down and talking those issues through. What does matter to us?
It is thinking outside the box a little bit, isn't it, really? It's embracing, I mean, most organisations be really focused on what they're doing and what their activities are, but actually, what can impact upon them. And we're talking the health and safety performance here. So what factors can impact on the success of the health and safety management system? It's very easy to think, of the operational activities, but perhaps a little bit more lateral thinking in terms of, we use the example of local authorities, for example. I'm sure they're, given the climate over the last 15 years or so, I'm sure they're now well versed in thinking about change of government and change of funding and things like that. But, Sally's right, it's not hard to think, well, actually, what about our neighbouring properties, for example? Environmentalists have been doing this for a long time, haven't they? What's the impact on the environment and the surrounding environment? Well, health and safety need to start thinking about that too, really. And I've no doubt a lot of them do, or, a lot of organisations won't find this challenging.
A lot of people doing it anyway.
Yes,
we
correct.
are all doing it anyway.
It's intuitive to some extent.
It's do it a little bit more systematically rather than scattergun approach, and do it sensibly, Sitting in the middle of London, we probably don't need to worry too much about volcanoes, and the health and safety risks of volcanoes. Yeah. But there are other considerations in London. Long term, is there a flooding issue? Is it, what would we do in a terrorist situation? They're worth thinking about because we're in London right now. If we were in rural Wales, there would be a different set of health and safety implications for our context.
We're tying health and safety into wider business risk at that point, so they're doing it anyway in responsible organisations.
Yeah. So on your wider health point, if you were looking at, say, if you were in the northeast and you talked to your local NHS trust and you found out what were the kind of the biggest health risks, kind of societal health risks or lifestyle health risks to the working population in your area, and you brought in programs that were to help with, stopping type 2 diabetes or whatever it was, that would count towards that sense of the context that you operate in working.
If that's what you decide you want to do to improve your workers' health, invest in that worker, then why not?
Yeah. But it can be part of your context. If you find you're having an awful lot of people having to take early retirement because of health issues, because of their lifestyle, there's a real opportunity there, isn't there? How can your organisation make that an issue for you? Yeah. Let's support lifestyle changes that don't lead to retirement at 50 over and over again because people are too sick to work.
Sure. I'm not suggesting people do it just to supply material on context, but I'm saying that if you had done that already, then that would be the kind of thing that you'd show an auditor as a sense of your context, both geographically and kind of socially.
Yeah, I think that's a really good example, and it's almost a best practice example, to be honest. What you've given, Louis, but it is a good example. But I take Terry's point about it is about the wider context of not just of what your activities, your organisation's activities have on the other people and other interested parties. It's not just about our little workforce. It's what your end users, you know, your contractors, this type of thing. We should be influencing their behaviours and things like that. That's all part of the context of the organisation.
And you're talking about having a sustainable business that's going to be there for years to come,
exactly,
and hopefully expanding and growing at the same time.
So I don't think it's something people should look at and think, oh God, you know, what do we do, you know, and make it into a huge exercise. It's beneficial to the organisation. Even the examples we've just been talking about, you know, you can see that they would bring benefits to any organisation, wouldn't they? And that's, you know, the whole point of the standard, really, isn't it? It's not to fulfil the need of a standard particularly, it's to actually, you know, make a business benefit.
And you don't need to provide extensive documentation about context.
No.
It's just back to when you're having those conversations at audit, that you can demonstrate that you have thought about this. You are self-aware as an organisation. So don't make it hard, make it productive.
Sure. Yeah, and effective.
Okay. Continual improvement is another thing that I think people have focused on in the drafts. You know, picking bits out of the drafts is that what are the kind of things that you think are the kind of that people will be the easiest things to focus on in terms of continual improvement? Is it just things like accident rates, or be leading indicators as well?
It's always been there in 18,000. It's been there since Plan, Do, Check, Act was first thought of. Continual improvement's always been there. In safety, a lot of companies have done the lagging side of things, the accidents and so on, the sickness absence. But do they analyse the sickness absence for, is it work related, is it home related, is there anything we can influence about it, look at health and well-being and so on. So can we be a bit more positive with that data? But then we need to do the leading indicators as well.
I mean, will it be different? I suppose I'm asking for 45,001. Will what auditors are looking for in continual improvement be different?
I'm not sure it will. If they were doing it right to begin with, continual improvement was in 18,000.
Not different. It's just they've got the potential to be more diverse, shall we say. I think people have got into very stereotypical views of, to demonstrate continual improvement, we have to demonstrate this. And I think that's become quite fixed in people's understanding of what the standard requires. Whereas continual improvement can be almost anything. Training, gym memberships, health and well-being activity. There's a whole range of things.
As David said, it's been happening for years anyway. We do a risk assessment, we come up with some controls. That's an improvement. You know, and we're doing that all year round without thinking about it.
Yeah.
And you can improve your management system. You can make, you know, make it more effective. You can demonstrate that. Demonstrate you've got better, more effective processes for worker participation. That is improvement.
Which leads into leadership again, doesn't it?
So there you go.
You know, you perform, your top management reviews and things like that. You know, the outputs from those are continual improvement, because hopefully you're assessing, you know, how effective we've been in implementing the system. What we can do to improve it. Is a perfect example, isn't it, of continual improvement. Not continuous, as it's often referred to.
Some argument over the difference.
There's always a discussion point. Anyway.
Continual.
Yeah. I mean, that's why objectives are integrated into the management system, isn't it? That's a way for you to identify the key areas that you want to improve in a particular time frame or under a particular circumstance. That's what they're there for. That's a primary mechanism of continual improvement.
I don't see this causing people any great challenge, to be honest with you. I think, as I say, I think most organisations will be able to demonstrate this, even by default. Even at a very basic level, it's a natural thing. Risk assessment, for example.
And again, you don't need massive documents showing your improvements. It'll come out through the interviews and the discussions.
I've picked on the bits that I thought were the kind of that most people have picked on as being the significant changes, not continual improvement, but the others as significant changes in the new standard. Is there anything that in the clauses that you think has not enough attention has been drawn to, Terry?
I think we discussed earlier, prior to this, we had a discussion around health and various things. I think the emphasis can be lost slightly on the health issues. I think people traditionally fall into the, oh, well, health and safety, it's all about accidents and accident stats, and not necessarily, although certainly within the UK that's changing in the last few years. The profile of health and well-being is growing, and that's potentially the other area that I think it's not that it's not there in the standard, but you need to use it to best effect within the standard, I think, is the fairness, because it can mean so much to so many different people.
I agree, and I think health could be more emphasised in 45001, and the reason it isn't is because it is difficult. Safety is easier to manage than health, and people's understanding of what occupational health is not the same. No two people really have the same view on what it is, and legislation doesn't have the same view of what occupational health is as people on the ground. The HSE view is that well-being has nothing to do with occupational health. But the popular view, the research says, oh yes it is, it's the foundation of occupational health. And moving away from occupational hygiene, you know, it's not just about asbestos, it's not just about lung diseases, it is about psychosocial risks. So I think it is in there in 45001. But a good organisation and organisations that really embracing the possible benefits of it will take it further than the explicit requirements.
David, do you think there's any elements that people have not paid very much attention to that will be, particularly if people are certified to 18001, that will be a change for them?
Well, the first point is I concur with everybody about the slightly missed opportunity in terms of health and well-being. I think it could have been perhaps emphasised a little bit, although I do agree the standard is an enabling standard which enables you to bring into the clauses health and well-being issues. But I do think they sort of missed a little bit of a trick there, to be honest. But no, I think all the areas we focused on in terms of in the discussion in terms of leadership and worker participation are massive steps forward from 18001. I do think people should focus on that, organisations that are currently certified to 18, because it is the main theme of the standard, really. As we've discussed, all the other clauses link into it. Is it going to cause challenges? Is it going to cause problems? Well, I think challenges it will do, yeah. Problems possibly not, but there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's the whole, in my view, that's the whole purpose of introducing a new standard, isn't it? That it does provide challenges. It does make people up their game, and you know, I'm really big advocate. I think it's a very, very contemporary. I think it's very robust. It's very well structured, and I think it gives a framework for a modern, effective health and safety management system. In my view, I think it's you know, I'm quite keen on it. I'm a big advocate. You can pay me later.
Then that feels like we've covered the main elements that people who might already be certified should be looking to concentrate on. A little bit more about how about preparing. How would you, and I have to thank Richard Jones, policy head at IOSH, for this question. He sent us a few questions to ask. And in those organisations that have had 18001 for some years, how do OSH professionals get people enthused about taking up the new standard?
I think coming back to that word opportunity again, is there an opportunity to have a refresh, get rid of that stale, it's the safety manager's job mentality, and change it to it's a business benefit? There's that opportunity to sell it to senior management, that it's important, it's got ISO in front of it, so it's internationally recognised. So if we're talking about customers, supply chains, it's a bigger, wider, more important thing, you could almost argue, in some companies. Sure. So the enthusiasm needs to come from those people at the top. So how do we convince them? Back to the arguments about business benefits, cost benefits analysis, healthy workers, it's tying it all together again.
Let's stick to that for a moment then. I will come back to the workforce more generally, but if we're looking at then, we're partly talking then about selling it to senior management, aren't we, and about getting them to take on that leadership commitment.
I think the adoption of Annex SL and the framework within the ISO management suite of systems is a huge step forward, because it does primarily bring occupational health and safety back into the organisational needs and requirements, because it's based on what the organisation itself needs, not the plaque on the wall, the tick the box, the whatever. Yes.
I think we talked before, didn't we, about health and safety practitioners, you know, having to fight the corner, sell. You know, I think this, you know, I think that really does. This really does give an opportunity for health and safety people to, you know, really clearly demonstrate the benefits of integration of health and safety across the business. It's not only modelled on environmental and quality standards and other management disciplines. It's positively almost demanding that you integrate health and safety, and you know, to me that's exactly what everybody should be doing. Why should health and safety, you know, say it again, but why should it be any different than any other management discipline? It shouldn't. It's not any less or any more important than any other aspect of the business. It should be integrated into everything everybody does. And I think the standard, you know, I'm not sure about the word enthuse, but I think it gives the opportunity for health and safety professionals to take a different approach, as well as, you know, we keep going on about top management, but also I think it gives health and safety people an opportunity as well to take a different approach, you know, when trying to convince is probably not the right word, but trying to influence top management within an organisation. I think this gives us a great opportunity. I really do.
I think we talked before about it being an enabling tool. It's an empowering tool, and I think that will breed enthusiasm. I think the requirements on worker participation and consultation will breed enthusiasm. It is giving people who may not have felt they had a voice before a voice, and a voice that top management needs to engage with if they're going to achieve this. And it comes back to, we touched very lightly on it in 45,001, but promoting a positive OHS culture throughout the organisation. And actually, if you talk throughout the organisation of the benefits of having a positive culture that supports health, that supports well-being as well as safety, I think you'll get enthusiasm naturally. I don't think it's a hard sell, because people will see there's benefit to them.
So you're not doing, when you set up improved forms of, or when you try and increase involvement, then you're not doing that with reference to the standard explicitly, are you? You're doing it and then you go for the standard once you feel those things are well established. So it's kind of, you're not enthusing people about the standard, you're enthusing people about just running better OSH in the organisation and giving them more of a voice, and then at the back of that, it comes back to a discussion we were having earlier on about whether or not you're going for the badge or whether or not you're going for the system that naturally earns you the badge. And I think all of you have been saying very strongly throughout that you're going for, that you should be going for the system. And of course you have the right not to be certified. You have the right to follow the standard because it's the right thing to do, and then decide that you don't want or need certification at the end of that
certificate
process.
Won't make you a better organisation. Embracing the standard will. It will improve you, and it will improve everybody within it if it's done in the right way. I mean, there's a huge opportunity here for top management to look good. You know, how do we make our organisation a better place to work? Because that's what it comes down to.
It will deliver benefit. It's a proven management model. in principle, there's
It's very
nothing...
contemporary, isn't it? And
it's very contemporary, it's very flexible,
that's what's
it's
been
very
needed for some
organisation
time.
focused, as opposed to saying to meet the requirements you shall have this. It says you'll meet the requirements based on your own needs and requirements. What more can they say?
Oh, it's lovely, isn't
that
it?
That is
build a system that works for you,
that's
works for us.
and that's the message. And by definition, it's a proven model. It will deliver benefit, and it will deliver benefit to the extent in which you embrace the model. If you do it lightly, then you'll get light benefits.
Well, if you just look at what the requirements are, that's not what it's about.
Yeah.
It's not, here's a bit of evidence for requirement 1, here's one for
Yeah.
requirement 2. You'll get very limited benefits from that. It's got to be a whole organisation approach for the good of the organisation and
With
the
that
people
word
who work there.
enthusiasm right throughout.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've got to believe in it. This is what we're back to leadership commitment and promotion. You've got to believe in what you're doing.
A technical one. The standard 45001 requires organisations to assess health and safety risk, but also risks to the management system itself. What sort of thing would that cover? What sort of things would be risks to the management system?
If we don't have the leadership commitment, if we don't have the resourcing, we don't have the competency, is the system going to run smoothly? Is it going to be successful? Is it going to achieve what we want it to achieve? So I think that those are some of the risks to the system. If you're not following it, you're not enthusiastic, you're not passionate about it, then it's not going to happen, it's not going to work. So those are risks to the system initially.
And using the mechanisms within the system, the internal audit process, the risk review, all the various things that are built in, and you'll review them at the appropriate time for your organisation, etc., etc. These are all mechanisms to reaffirm that the system overall is delivering benefit, the intended benefit that the organisation wanted from it. And if that starts to fall down, you need to be aware of it. So that's one of the primary reasons for doing internal audit processes and various verifications, compliance, etc. And so there's numerous mechanisms within the management system itself that are there to help you indicate whether you're getting effective benefit from the system.
And I think one of the biggest risks to the management system is having a health and safety manager who runs the management system. It's don't put all the knowledge in one place. It's things like that you have to consider. Business continuity. If that person, the guru, the health and safety management system guru, goes off sick, is it all going to fall apart, or are those checks and measures built into the management system? Do enough people understand what we're doing and why we're doing it, and how it all fits together?
It's about the deliberate move to integrate it, isn't it? Again, we keep going back to the same point, but it's true, isn't it? And that's a really good point, actually, because I think that's one thing health and safety people need to get their heads around as well, is that this issue is great by integrating health and safety across the business, but that also might mean a change in emphasis in health and safety roles. For example,
Yeah.
You become more of a monitoring and an improvement resource, if you like, rather than
A doer.
all singing, all dancing health and safety, which is great, isn't it? Because that's how it should be, really.
And it is that knowledge sharing.
Yeah.
It's giving more and more people within the organisation a better understanding of the whole and why we do things. Don't just do it, understand why you do it. And then you have got lots of people who can pick up and help each other out and point out when they can see a problem coming. It's not down to the health and safety managers anymore.
There's an opportunity for the safety practitioner to widen their knowledge at that point. They're not sat in their little silo. They can see other things that are happening in management, at business, risk, and can grow their knowledge. Opportunities for them to further their career, you could argue.
Continual improvement.
Yes.
And round the cycle goes.
And I think also, particularly perhaps for smaller organisations, individuals frequently find they are suddenly the health and safety person. They have no expertise, they have no training. So that's a risk. The organisation decided they want to go for 45,001. Previously, John put in 18,001. John's retired, and suddenly there's somebody new there. That kind of thing is a risk to your management system. Make sure people have the resource they need. Make sure they have the training they need, so they are competent to do it well, and take it away from it being a how do I meet the requirements to an understanding of the subject and an understanding of how the management system works with everything else.
So you're almost saying that if you're the safety practitioner and you're tasked by senior management with getting the organisation to the standard, your feedback immediately would have to be, I can do that, but providing the following, the resources, the commitment from everyone on the senior team, and so on, that you would need to push back to make sure that they didn't think it was your job to go and make the organisation fit for that.
Well, absolutely, because going back to the leadership clause again, you wouldn't get that anyway if you weren't able to demonstrate that commitment and resources. It wouldn't happen, no matter how proficient your health and safety person was.
No, there's a cultural change, isn't there? Because it's not just having the resources and there's a cultural change whereby people are encouraged to say no or why or whatever, rather than I'm doing that because it's been dictated from up on high. It's that application of that system and the culture change that can bring about within an organisation, which is the real empowerment. And that's what we're looking for within the management system.
Yeah,
not just the component parts.
Yeah, and making sure competence is organisational. Yeah. It's not individual. It's not down to a handful of competent people. It's that within the organisation that competence is there. That's a risk to the management system if it isn't, or if it rests in too few people, or people leave, staff changes. So it's planning for the future, it's succession planning. That will keep your management system good and strong and healthy.
I think that's reached the end of my questions. Do you think there's anything as a final message to people who are considering going for the standard that you'd like to leave them with?
I think they need to not rush it. There is a time frame to move over from 18,000 if you're already certified. There is this 3-year plan, but you don't have to be the first one to do it. There's an internal bit of, oh, aren't we brilliant for being first, but have you actually done it meaningfully? Have you done it properly? So I don't think there's a desperate urge to rush. At the same time, please don't leave it until 3 years from now and then suddenly think, oh, we'd better do it. Yeah. Talk to your certification body and work with them, I think would make sense.
I would just say embrace it. Embrace the structure of the management system. There's nothing to be afraid of. There's nothing potentially within the management system that isn't already at some level integrated to within your business. It is a business management model that works. So embrace that and use it for the maximum benefit.
Yeah, don't see it as a burden. This is an opportunity to benefit, to improve. Take it step by step, do it at a steady pace that can be maintained. As you're saying, Mike, don't rush it, you don't need to. And every little bit that you improve on and change and address will bring a benefit. So don't worry about it, just embrace it and do it.
All of the above. I think like the main theme is that it isn't something to look on as a burden. It's positive, it's constructive, it's very contemporary, and it can only bring positive benefits to the organisation by adopting the standard. I can't think of any negative aspects at all for anybody, any organisation about it. For me, it's been long overdue. We are where we are, but I think organisations should really embrace it.
And remember that it's yours. Make it work for you. Another organisation's management system won't be the same. So do what feels right for your organisation.
I think that's a really good point to end on. Thank you. So Mike, Terry, Sally, David, and thank you for watching. An edited version of this may already have appeared on the IOSH Magazine website and would appear in the next issue of IOSH Magazine. But thanks for watching.